here. This month's in-service is going over our Emergency Operations Plan, or our EOP. We actually had to change the EOP name from Disaster Manual to Emergency Operations Plan. That was one of the mandated changes that occurred in 2015. So my first question is, where are these EOP books located in your work area? They're located at the nurses station and the clean utilities. They're actually on the wall by the door, just kind of in a little binder holder like this, so they're easier to find. And then in the kitchen, they are in Nick's office. There's one at the front desk, the therapy gym, housekeeping, my office, of course. So again, those CMS changes occurred in 2015. We did have to include a pictorial utility shutoff. We all know that the one-off kind of emergency things happen, the floods happen on night shift when maintenance and administration is not here in the building. So we have to have access for the night staff to be able, or all staff to be able to go down and shut off the water if they need to, the gas, and also the electric. We did have a flood on Station 1 a couple of years back, and really if we were able to shut that water off, we would have alleviated the damage or having to move as many residents as we did have to. So it's really important that all staff know that the pictorial shutoffs are in here. These areas for the gas and the water are located down in the cage downstairs in the storage area. We also updated our citywide transfer agreement. This is a great resource for us from the community. It's basically all of the healthcare facilities. We all pull together. We have this mutual agreement that if we were to have to evacuate residents due to an emergency, we would be able to use all of our transportation resources, meaning that we could use Madonna's vehicles to transport residents out and other healthcare agencies, facilities, and their transportation to move residents and staff out if we needed to. So it's a really great resource that we pool all of our resources together to be able to make those moves happen as quickly and efficiently as possible. Of course, we updated our internal policies and procedures. It's actually a new requirement that we review them at least once a year and make note that we reviewed them, annually, and then update any changes that need to be made during that time as well. We did transition to plain language, meaning that we don't have codes for everything like we used to. If you don't hear a code frequently, spend half your time trying to figure out what the code means. So we got rid of all the codes and transitioned, and we only have code blue for a medical emergency. If a person is not responsive, not breathing, heart's not beating, that's when we use code blue. And then we have code silver that is for if there's weapons or an active shooter involved. We also transitioned in 2015 to a national incident management system, NIMS, or we call ICS, kind of the incident commander system. And what that is we have different, like the incident commander, the person that's activating the plan, and then different positions below them that would support through the emergency. And if we had to have agencies come in from other, outside of healthcare, outside of the state, and come in and help us, they would just help assume those roles and know what their expectation and their requirements were for that position. We also implemented an HVA, or a hazard vulnerability assessment, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, as if in 2015 there weren't enough changes, in 2018 we implemented what the surveyors call E-tags, what the state calls E-tags, and basically what it is a whole different set of life safety code tags on top of the K tags that the fire marshal can already issue. So we can essentially, and we did, get tagged for the same thing, so one deficiency, but we can get tagged with two different tags now as well. So that hazard vulnerability assessment, or HVA, basically what we do is we look at all the natural disasters, the human caused events, and the neighboring threats with the community of Lincoln and where Lancaster is located, and we make our plan accordingly. There's no sense in having a hurricane plan because we're not going to have a hurricane in Nebraska. We may have snow in March, but we're not going to have a hurricane. So we make sure that our plans really fit the building and what we need. We don't need to make plans for something that's not going to happen here. And that also has to be updated annually as well. So looking at our whole incident management, of course, we don't want the emergency to happen. We want to try to reduce the probability of it happening or completely eliminate it if at all possible, but that's not really humanly possible. So we have to have all of our policies and plans in place to be prepared if there were to be an emergency happen. And of course then going a little bit further, and who's going to be responding to that, who's going to be activating the plan, and just kind of breaking it down. And then it's great to have all these plans and processes and procedures in place, but then how do we get back to normal operations afterwards? So again, that use of plain text by staff, we only have code blue for medical emergency. Now I did have a question, what if somebody falls at the front desk? Well, if they're okay and they're alert, that's not considered a full-on code blue medical emergency. We would just page nurse stat to front desk or wherever the location was. So it's a little bit different for that. And then code silver is if there's weapons, an active shooter, or hostile persons involved. So the people responsible for actually activating the plan, of course, if you're on your station and you see a fire, that's kind of your initial, activation of the plan. And then the incident commander is the Station 3 charge nurse or house supervisor. The reason that we have either one of those be the incident commander is because obviously they're the administrator, myself, and director of nursing, director of maintenance. We're not all here 24/7, so it has to be for that initial person, the initial incident commander, plan activation, has to be somebody that is in the building at all times. So Station 3 charge nurse is our primary incident commander. They would take over the emergency once it was activated. Of course, we have to have backups for everything. So administrator, myself, the associate administrator, director of nursing, maintenance director are all kind of added in for that layer. This is just a visual look at the layout. So the incident commander is the top person, and then the different team falls below that with different responsibilities. And that way you're not having just one person trying to manage everything. We break it out as a team and know that the business office is going to be handling financials. We know that HR is going to be handling staff needs. And that's another point too. If we go through an emergency, the last thing you really think about is the money piece of it and tracking where people are at. And so we do have to have that responsibility. For instance, if we were to evacuate and go to one of our evacuation sites like the church across the street and we're there over midnight, then we don't get reimbursed for any of that care that we provide to the residents during that time, and we also don't get reimbursed for any of the supplies that we use, any of that. So it's really important that we track what's being used and where we're at. For managing staff support needs, if we were to have to shelter in place, which we probably actually almost had to do a couple weekends ago during the snowstorm because it was hard to get out, we would be able to set up with it wouldn't be ideal, but we could set up with beds and different toiletries if needed here at the facility. Those spaces would be here in the theater, in the chapel, library, any resident rooms that are empty, office spaces. It's really just kind of managing through what you can while you're here at the facility. If we were to have to evacuate anywhere, either for staff and residents, our first primary would be the Manual Church right across South Street. We also have Saratoga in our back parking lot over here that we could evacuate to, and we are actually one of their evacuation sites for all the students. Their primary is the Manual Church as well, but if they couldn't accommodate their needs during that time, they would come to the facility as well. So we do community work as far as helping Saratoga as well. We do have to have a skilled nursing facility on our list that is here in town within about 5 to 10 miles. So our sister facility, Homestead Rehabilitation Center, is also one of our evacuation sites. It also is a requirement to have a facility that is 40 miles or more away, And so Ridgecrest Rehab is our facility in Omaha that we could evacuate to as well. Okay, could someone tell me what they would do if there were to be a fire in a resident's room? Your first initial plan of action?
Rescue the resident.
Yeah, rescue the resident. So we follow a RACE because we have acronyms for everything. So it's rescue, alarm, confine, and evacuate. Your first and foremost would be to rescue the resident that is in the affected area of the room. Obviously, you don't want to harm yourself. So if the room's totally engulfed, but if there's just a flame over in the corner or electronic caught on fire, our first primary would be to get the resident out of that room. We also have to evacuate the room that's across and then on both sides and above and below. So that's where the alarming really comes into play. So initially you'd want to pull the fire alarm and announce overhead where the fire is located. So fire room 229. Fire room 229. So you say it 3 times. It used to be code red. Now it's just plain and simple fire emergency and where the fire is located at. We do have to call the fire department, and to dial out, you dial 99 before you call out. So it'd be 99911. Confining, we have to go through and close all of the doors throughout the facility. When the fire alarms go off, the ones with magnetic holds are going to automatically close. So those kind of swinging doors that can go onto the station by the dining rooms, those types of doors with any magnetic hold are going to release and they're going to close. But for resident rooms, it's important that you go through. That's a smoke barrier, and so close those doors. You don't have to evacuate everyone out. Close those doors. The residents that you rescue out of the rooms, you would want to just take to a bathhouse or the nearest behind a smoke door. We would not evacuate a whole wing or a whole facility unless the fire department gave us directive to do so. So to kind of form more of a visual, and I can't really move because I have this cord, but if there were to be a fire in 229, you would want to evacuate 231 and 227. So looking in the map on either side of that room, and then across. Now some of the rooms have 2 rooms across. So you have the room here, and then across the hallway there's a door here and a door here. You would actually need to evacuate both those rooms because they're both across the hall, right directly across the hall. So you'd want to evacuate, like I said, 229, 227, and then if both rooms line up that's across the hall, you would need to evacuate both 230 and 228. I just have to visually see it when you're there. So what will happen is the nurse station doors will close whenever you're going onto the station for the whole facility, and you just want to keep everyone in there. You don't want to break those big barriers to go onto the unit. So there's been question because our plan says, like, if you're in dietary or if you're not assigned to a specific area, that you need to report to Station 3, which is our incident command area. That is true. So if the fire is not on Station 3, you go on to Station 3 to kind of get your assignments as needed. You do not want to go on to Station 2 during that time. Now, if the fire is on Station 3, you don't want to go in there to, for your incident command center. So the backup for that is Station 2. So it's kind of wherever the fire is, just don't break those big doors and go on to the station. With that being said, if we were to have to evacuate the entire facility or the entire wing, you're not going to obviously want to cross in front of the fire. I mean, there's going to be fire probably out in the hallway, so common sense, you wouldn't go through the fire to get to people, in 239, 236, further down in the hallway. So coming up here, if the 229, all those rooms that are closer to the nurse's station, you would actually evacuate out the emergency door on Station 2A hall. So you would not come out of those smoke doors to go throughout the facility and come to the front door. You would take them out the emergency exit on Station 2 on Station 2A hall, and then the people that are at the end of Station 2B hall, you would actually have to go out through that emergency door, which will be released when the fire alarm goes off, and then come in and get them. So it's kind of hard to explain, but you wouldn't obviously want to cross the path of fire. Another thing is how to use the phones. So looking at them, if you don't know the phones, they can be really overwhelming, especially if you don't use them every day while you're here. So just know that the phone here it's the fourth button up on the very right hand side. There's a page button sticker, and so simply what you do is you just pick up the phone and you push that page button, and you would say fire emergency room 229, and you would say that 3 times. So that's all you do. Then to end the call, you just hang up. So fire emergency 3 times, push the page button, and then hang up afterwards. If you see a phone that does not have that sticker, because they fall off sometimes when you're using them a lot, it's really important that you put in a work order for maintenance, and then they actually give it to me and I put a sticker on the phone. It's just hard to manage all of the phones, so if you see one, let maintenance know. It's just important that everyone knows, how do you page and pick up the phone and page if needed. So pick it up, push page, and say what you need to say, and then hang up. And then again, to dial out, you dial 99, whatever the number is, so 99911. Jumping into our tornado policy, tornado watch is when the likelihood of a tornado occurring is higher. There has not been an actual tornado spotted, but just the likelihood of it happening, and their kind of potential of producing a tornado is there. Tornado warning means a tornado or an actual rotation has been spotted. And with a tornado warning and tornado watch, what we do, we all have weather radios at the stations, and also the front desk down in dietary. So whoever hears that go off, typically it's going to be the front desk receptionist. But if they're not here, they stepped away, they've gone home for the day, anyone can page that if they're hearing it. So you just pick it up and page tornado watch or tornado warning 3 times. Tornado watch is kind of our time to prepare. So that's when we go through the facility, make sure the hallways are clear, make sure the bathhouses are clear, close the blinds, make sure you have your emergency kits ready. Emergency kits are located down in central supply on the shelf when you walk in, and that has water in there, flashlights, headlamps, anything that you would need to use during an emergency initially. So just prepare during a tornado watch. Tornado warning is when we actually take action and we start moving residents to their shelter. So on the stations, we would be moving the residents to the bathhouses. Now I know not every resident fits in the bathhouse, so what you would do is close the doors onto the station and start seating people around the nurse's station. So just make sure those doors are closed. A resident has the right to refuse to get out of their room and go to the bathhouse. And that, or if they're bedridden and you cannot move them, you would just want to move them as far away from the window as you can, and then pull the blanket up, to their neck and make sure they're comfortable. So. Okay. And I should say on the tornado warning as well. So dietary, a new change is not for them to come to station 3 just because there's so much going on up there, unless the incident commander needs all staff up to the incident command center. So they would just stay down in the basement. You're kind of in a safe spot down there in the basement, so you wouldn't need to report to station 3. And of course, if you're on a station and you feel like you can help, you can jump in and ask. But if you're in the basement, just stay in the basement. Okay, for a hazardous chemical spill policy, really if you get a chemical on your skin or in your eyes, it's just really important to flush the area, flush your eyes, announce chemical spill to the location so it can be cleaned up by housekeeping or whoever is here that can clean up the chemical, and work through the team if you need to submit work comp or anything like that. But really just flush the area, take care of yourself. If you're having seeing a staff member struggle, guide them to an eye wash station on your station and help them get the chemical cleaned off. For snow and ice storm policy, I hope we're almost done with this, but really essentially what this means is if you are working and it's taking longer for the next shift to come in, or they're having trouble get in, then we can't have everyone clock out at 2:30 or at 6:30 or whatever time and leave the building without having anyone here to meet to fill in their spot. So in this, we just ask that staff stay here until we have enough adequate staff here to take care of the residents. Not meaning that you're stuck here, but really just waiting for make sure we have enough people here. A lot of times, us as the leadership team, we can go out and get people if needed. We're actually doing that this morning. And so if you are having trouble getting in, it's just our first and foremost priority that the residents are cared for. We're a 24-hour facility. We can't close up shop. We don't have snow days. And so it's really important that we make our best effort to get in here and take care of the residents. They have to eat, they have to have their cares and their needs met. And so we would just really need everyone to make that a priority. Active shooter and weapon policy. This kind of goes against everything that we learn in healthcare. We always put the resident first in everything else. And with an active shooter policy, first and foremost, your whole priority is to take care of yourself, to keep yourself safe. So whatever that means in the situation, it's not anything I can tell you, but in the situation, you can hide, you can flee the building, take care of save yourself. So leave the facility. If you can, dial 911. I'd had a question, somebody comes into the front desk and they're an active shooter, how do I dial or how do I page? I'm not gonna ask you to sit there in front of the shooter and page everyone, but if you see something and you hear it down the hallway, you can pick up the phone and page, code silver, front desk or what have you, and dial 911 because we need to get the police and the SWAT team or whoever here as soon as they can get here to alleviate the situation. I will tell you it's really unfortunate, but most of the time if there's an active shooter in a skilled nursing facility, it's actually a loved one coming in, and a lot of times they'll shoot the resident and then shoot themselves is really a lot of times what happens in long-term care facilities. So just kind of have that in the back of your mind. It sounds crazy, but that's typically what happens in healthcare. For bomb threat policy, if you get a bomb threat call, really talk to the caller, keep them on the phone line, try to get as much information, make note of their voice, if they're male or female, just make note of the way they're talking, just the way their voice sounds. Try to get as much information as you can. Ask them where the bomb is at, what it looks like, just try to get as much information. Of course, if we know where it's at or if we see a suspicious object, we don't want to be in that area, so steer clear. And again, call 911 during that time. Obviously, we want to announce that we had a suspicious call coming in and that we need to initiate the emergency operations plan and to steer clear of the area that the bomb is in. As Lancaster Rehabilitation Center, we are actually really involved in the community, meaning that we pull resources from the Lancaster County Healthcare Coalition and the Emergency Plan Committee to use resources. That's where the citywide transfer agreement came from. With that being said, we also participate in a surge, meaning if there were to be a big emergency event that would totally inundate the hospitals most likely would take their lesser critical patients and then push them to our facility so they could take on more patients. So just know that that may happen, and we would work with the hospital system and emergency planning to make sure we would have enough beds to meet the needs of the people coming in. We also participate in what we call a closed pod for medication. So if there were to be a mass outbreak, a lot of times they use anthrax as an example. If there were to be an anthrax here in Lincoln or Lancaster County area where everyone in the community needed to be treated with medication, we're actually a closed pod facility. So what we would do is we would get a count of our staff and residents and staff's family members. We will go to the Department of Health after we worked through and figured out what medication each person needed. There's an online algorithm that we have to use. And we would actually go to the health department, get all the medication that were allotted. We would come back here to the facility. We would give the medication to staff that are working, and then we would give the medication to residents that are in the building. The next phase would be the rest of the staff that are not in the facility and all staff's family members. So it's kind of a different phase, but we do have that resource to be able to use medications. There are open pod facilities, which are high schools, that everyone in the community can go running into, but as a big of a facility as we are being healthcare, we can't have all of our staff go wait in line. So we're here, we have the medications if we need, if we have that resource if needed, where we would provide it for you, residents, and your family. Elopement policy if we have a resident that goes missing, first and foremost, obviously you want to search your area as much as the facility as you can. Maybe they're in the chapel doing a puzzle and you didn't know they were in there. So just make sure you search the facility, kind of initiate a head count for your station and all the other stations if they're out doing an activity. Check the front desk, maybe they signed out with family. If you can't find the resident, then the charge nurse of that station should page the resident's name to report to the station. The resident doesn't appear in a couple of minutes, then it's time to initiate all staff, all hands on deck. So we would then say all available staff, please report to station 1 or whatever the station is. At that time, the charge nurse is kind of the one on that station to get things going. Incident commander on station 3 then would jump in and help, but really it's assigning people to the community, making note of what the resident looks like. So in this emergency planner on your station, there is, let's see here, the elopement policy is in here. It kind of goes through everything. And then the next tab is all the forms that you would need to fill out, and there's several copies in there. So it walks you through, the resident missing, any of the information. You put the search teams on here, you just fill this out. And then the map tells you where we kind of have a little quadrant around the facility of where to assign staff to go look for the resident. I will tell you, in an experience that I had at a different facility, unless the resident has a dementia diagnosis, they are at harm to themselves or other people, the police are not any help at all. I had a resident go missing and they essentially asked me, why are you even worried about it? They're their own person, and so if they're a resident here, they're our responsibility, and so we need to make sure they're safe. And it's unfortunate, but we have to kind of almost create our own search teams. The police are not much help. They'll kind of have people out looking, but they're not as worried about it as we are. So we do have to let the police know so they can be aware, but essentially it's kind of fending for ourselves and trying to find the resident. So that kind of goes through there. And then the checklist, because there's a lot of things happening all at one time and everything in that moment is a priority to find the resident. There's a checklist that goes through everything here to kind of be a triple check for you to make sure that we have all of our bases, crossed. If it's off hours, the leadership team, the administrator, director of nursing would need to be notified so we can get all hands on deck to come in and search for the resident. Of course, once the resident is found, bless you. The incident commander needs to do a total body assessment of the resident, and make sure we have immediate needs met for the resident. If they had a wonder guard, we need to figure out why the alarm didn't go off and why they got out the front door. Did they cut it off? Was there a malfunction with our system? If they didn't have one, then they probably at least need one until we can get something else in place for them. And then you notify the respective parties. Looking back at 2018, we had our survey right after Thanksgiving, actually. So we have our state survey, which is when the surveyors are here, they do their audit for about 2 weeks almost. During that time, we also have the fire marshal that comes in. The state fire marshal comes in and looks at the overall safety of the building. We got these tags last year, and that first one is what I was telling you, how you can get tagged for the same thing twice. So there was a new, a new requirement initiated in 2018 that required the generator fuel being tested. So literally we have to pull a sample of the generator fuel, have it tested in a lab to make sure it's not watered down or contaminated. So we did not have that done. It was a brand new requirement. So we got tagged for an E tag and also that K918 tag. So we got tagged twice for that. Obviously now we're on a rotation where we have the generator fuel tested, but that we did not have that done at that time. K211, the emergency exit sidewalks were icy. So I believe it was on station 2 and 3 maybe. They had gotten to all the other exit doors off the stations, but there was 2 that were icy still. So that was considered not accessible to evacuate the building. That also is important too, because if we have lifts and wheelchairs and things sitting in the hallways for too long, then we're also impeding that exit. So we could get tagged for the same thing simply because equipment is sitting in the hallway. K345, vendor documentation noted that an area was inaccessible during the inspection. They essentially just made a note on one of our two of our forms, and didn't have conversation with the director of maintenance. We didn't audit it, we didn't look at it, and just assumed that they did their audit. Well, it wasn't complete. Fire marshal looked at it and said that they couldn't access some sensor to look at. So we got tagged for that. We do have to educate vendors as they come in to keep that from happening again. And then K353, we had repeater for the internet wiring was zip tied to a sprinkler piping downstairs. That had been there for years, like 6 years, and we got tagged for it this year. So we obviously removed those zip ties and the wiring being attached to that. K363, there was the bistro and then a room on station 5 that didn't close and latch. So all of the doors are smoke doors, so they have to be able to close and latch. So if you have a door that's catching and not closing, or you don't hear that actual latch going into place, just let maintenance know so we can tighten it. With the weather being cold and hot and jumping all over the place, we all know that wood and different framework kind of expands and contracts. So especially during the change of seasons, that'll happen. So just make sure you put in a work order if you see that on your station. K711, the fire policy didn't have specific language saying that staff aren't to cross the fire. Now, it seems kind of silly because common sense would say if there's a fire going out into the hallway, you're not going to run through it to get to the other side. But we had to note that in our fire emergency policy specifically. We did have a power strip that was found in 217. It was actually a newer admission. And we can't have power strips in resident, or actually in the facility at all. So if you see a power strip, make sure you let the charge nurse know. We need to take it out of the room, educate the resident, and just make sure all staff are aware we can't have power strips in the resident rooms. And then the last one, we didn't have signage present in station 4 oxygen room saying that the cylinder, if it was empty or if it was full, for the little tiny oxygen cylinders that we try not to have in the building, but sometimes they come in, typically with hospice, but we didn't have signage saying whether it was full or empty. Looking ahead, on March 27th of this year, we participate in this every single year, but that is the statewide tornado drill exercise. Again, hopefully we don't have snow on the day because it won't really feel like it's real, but the 27th we will do all the sirens are going to go off, the weather radios will go off, and we will act as though if it's a real tornado watch or tornado warning. So the 27th, the watch sirens will go off at 10 o'clock. We will actually prepare as if there were a tornado watch. That's when we close the blinds and so on and so forth. Then we'll roll into a tornado warning at 10:15, where we'll actually have all hands on deck, moving residents to bathhouses, kind of getting in that rhythm as we jump into the season for tornadoes. And last but not least, just kind of an overview of what's in the Emergency Operations Manual. Other than that, do you guys have any questions about anything I covered today? Okay, that's all I have. Denise has things to go over with the CNA. So if the CNAs could stay, she has some things to cover with them. And everyone's free to go.